It seems everyone who has ever visited the Santa Monica Pier has a story to tell. Having spent over 25 years on the pier, I've certainly heard my share. Some stories resonate more than others, of course. Some are tales of great drama surrounding important events in the pier's history, and some simply transport you to a unique and wonderful era that you wish you had experienced. I'm Jim Harris, Deputy Director of the Santa Monica Pier Corporation, yet perhaps better known as the Pier Historian. I've had the great benefit of hearing the most fascinating stories about our beloved pier, and I'm taking this opportunity to share those stories, told in person, with you. When people think about the pier, they tend to visualize the beach and the ocean, Southern California's playground. Today we're going to talk about the heroes who have dedicated their lives to keeping the playground safe, the Santa Monica Lifeguards, represented today by former lifeguards Tom Volk and Harold Dunnigan. Tom and Harold, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Now, you were both members of the Santa Monica Lifeguard Service, stationed on the pier. What year did each of you enter the Lifeguard Service, and what inspired you to join? Tom?
I was inspired by a gentleman called Pete Peterson who said, "We want you to paddle for us." I had spent about 2 or 3 years practicing paddleboarding, and this was in 1947. So I was getting ready for the summer of 1947. I was 17 at the time, but by the time that they finished the tests, I would have been 18.
You needed to be 18 to be a lifeguard?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Harold?
Well, I was inspired by two surfers, one by the name of Buzzy Trent and the other by the name of Peter Cole. I met them when I was training on the football team at Santa Monica High School. I was on the 5th string, and we got to scrimmage against Buzzy and some of those early guys. And when the season was over, I decided that they were going to allow me to be a part of their community. So I got taken up to Malibu when there were surfing boards that weighed 90 pounds. And when the time came to take the lifeguard test, I think it was either Peter or Buzzy said, "Hey, you ought to come down and take the lifeguard test." And so I showed up and took the lifeguard test, and the rest is history.
The rest is history. Fantastic.
Yes.
And what career paths did each of you follow? Were you lifelong lifeguards, or how long were you in the service, and what have you done since your time in the service? Tom, we'll start with you again.
I left the lifeguard service in 1962 and went to work for the county of Ventura. They were looking for a harbor master, and I had been moved from my assignment as a lieutenant on the boats up to the office of being harbor master for several years. And with that guidance, I left and went to the county of Ventura, spent 25 years before retiring there. And after that, I opened a small business with my son running the business and 4 or 5 of my close friends investing in me. And we went on, and as I was doing that, I also consulted as primarily a specialist in the field of private-public partnerships on public land.
Okay. And Harold?
Well, I continued lifeguard until I was 75.
Wow.
But I became a permanent lifeguard for the city of Los Angeles. And in 1962, I was offered a position to open up the junior high school at Malibu. And I stayed with the Santa Monica Unified School District for 25 years. Was the vice principal at the continuation school and also at John Adams. And then put some time in it with the service, and here I am today.
So a lifeguard up until you were 75?
Yes.
That's amazing.
Well, we owe all of that to a lifeguard by the name of Tom Zahn, because once upon a time, the mandatory retirement age was 62, and he challenged that rule, and the folks said, so long as you can pass the physical qualifications, you can continue to do your job. And so many guys have continued to work long beyond 62 because their level of fitness is, they have to qualify every year, and they do it.
Sure, it's a rigorous job, right?
Oh, well, the thing about it, Jim, is you can be a fighter pilot just so long. And that means you have beaches that pound and surf. And there are other beaches where it's not quite so hazardous, and you kind of gravitate in there where your experience gives you kind of an edge as when to be in the water, so that people don't have to get rescued.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. So being a lifeguard, there's probably there's kind of a dream about being a lifeguard, and I think of a lot of it's been glorified on television. But what was life really like as a lifeguard? Tom, I'll start with you.
What was life like? I was involved in competition heavily, so my full year was coming to work at 9 o'clock in the morning, getting a workout, hitting the beach or hitting the boats by 11 o'clock and working through until 3 or 3:30, and then I would take a run down the beach from the Santa Monica Pier down to Ocean Park Pier and back, and take a shower, and that was time to go home. And that was the fall and winter. Summertime now was completely different. We were in the boat, we were really very active. Most of the weekdays we responded to calls. If the seas were up, we generally were hanging off of into riptides and all, and we're helping the lifeguards from the water side of taking people out on the water end rather than taking them back to the beach. In the summertime now, we were out patrolling almost the entire day up and down the beach and responding to calls. Generally, there were 2 boats run in the summer, and now we're talking about the city of Santa Monica and the Santa Monica beaches. Mm-hmm. And in the wintertime, we had 1 boat full-time in the water year-round. In fact, in the early 40s, late 40s, early 50s, we were the only boat in the bay in the wintertime. So the calls even went down to International Airport and different places.
Oh, a lot of territory.
Yeah, a lot of night calls.
A lot of training involved, constant training and
You know, yes, there's the fundamentals, but it takes a lot of years to learn many of the things because there's so many elements to it, particularly if you're working with the public all the time. As you may know, the Santa Monica Lifeguards were also responsible for the pier, and activities really went on, particularly in the summertime again, year-round. So that meant that you had encounters all different times with all different kinds of people. So human psychology was very important. It was very important in rescuing. It was very important in dealing with people who were having personal problems and other problems that they would bring to you in the regular tour of your business. So it was summers that were obviously very active. Wintertime, it would slow down.
Sure.
But your physical fitness had to be year-round. You had to be ready to act year-round.
Harold, what were some of your favorite experiences as a lifeguard?
Well, I worked for Santa Monica, and I don't think they had a rookie school at the time I went through. You came down, you did the swim, which was, and then you did a run, swim, run, and you had to have your life-saving card from the Red Cross, life-saving card, and first aid card, and you went to work. And but today the training is much more sophisticated. They run a 48-hour training program, and the guys that compete now are almost all world-class swimmers. Not all of them, fortunately, are highly skilled in the surf. And 1 year the surf was really huge, and the quick swimmers were a little intrepid about getting out through the surf, and the surfers had a better day. We look for someone who is surf conscious, can deal with the big surf, because during the summertime you have large crowds. I was thinking about Tom talking about being on the boat. I worked the boat, and this is when the old Ocean Park Pier divided Santa Monica from LA City.
Right.
And I would be on a patrol with my friend Ed Perry, who was the boat skipper, and we'd go around the pier, and Santa Monica would be almost belly to belly with people. But on the other side of the pier, it'd be scattered attendants. And we'd say, well, we're glad we're not over there. We go back over to our other side. Because the Santa Monica lifeguards more than earn their keep. Because when you lifeguard, the ocean is not your primary, it is your primary concern. But you've got lost children.
Sure.
You've got first aids. You've got drunks. You've got fights. See, now you cannot drink on the beach and you cannot smoke on the beach. So they've started to get a little more control, because oftentimes many of the rescues we made were people who were intoxicated. They'd go out there and they'd think they could swim the Catalina, and they'd get outside the surf line and they'd start to struggle, and that's when you have a competent lifeguard to go out there and pull him back in.
So there are a lot of skills involved with being a lifeguard, and many of them have to do with almost like law enforcement.
Oh yes, yeah. It's always nice to know that when you put the call through, that they're going to be there to help you, because oftentimes lifeguards are all by themselves out there. And the patrol, one guy on patrol, he's going to come by, and if it's a sticky situation, you want to be sure that you've got the police ready to respond.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Now, back in the day, the pier once had a very active yacht harbor. It wasn't just a pier with a beach beside it, like everyone knows it today. And in this harbor, there was a lot of boating activity and paddleboarding activity. And I'd just like it, perhaps, Tom, if you could take us back to those days of what the pier used to be like when it had this harbor that it was primarily known for.
To visualize it, there were approximately 100, 125 in the summertime boats kept out on moorings out in the harbor. That required constant maintenance of boats, moorings, lifting anchors and changing, so forth. And the harbor patrol really took care of that part of it. But the crowds were the same. We had overwhelming crowds in the summertime. Had a lot of characters. There's a lot of interesting people that you meet that come out. And being on the end of the pier, I had opportunities to talk to a lot of people because the boat was stationed there, and that's where we left from. So it was different than it is now. Probably a little more personable, but obviously the crowds now are overbearing in numbers, and you can't. It's hard to stand up. There's so many people.
Sure, but you had
anyway
a very exciting and an unpredictable job, and lots of things to oversee. You guys really make me feel like I want to be in the. It's almost like watching the TV show Baywatch and what you guys live through, and we'd like to learn much more about that. We're going to take a break now, but we will return to hear more about the fascinating life of the lifeguards.
Welcome to the Santa Monica Pier. My name is Mary Pat Cooney, and I'm here today to offer you a walking tour of the pier, sharing with you all the stories that I can remember of its 100-year history.
Scandals, there's fishing, there's surfing, there's boats, there's police. It's a slice of American life on the pier.
Welcome back. We left off with stories about what it was like to be a lifeguard back during the days of the Santa Monica Lifeguard. And now I think we want to turn our attention to some of the notable alumni, some of the characters who really defined that organization and made it special. And I wonder if you guys could please tell me a little bit about, well, the man who started it all, Cap Watkins.
You want to start with me?
Yes, Tom, let's start with you.
Cap, I dealt mostly with the lieutenant level, and I was just a regular lifeguard. Cap was always there, but he was really the face of the organization. He was the person who was the front person, a very charming man and interesting to be with. And the lieutenants were his strong points. They were mostly all veterans who come back from World War II when I arrived, and they all had their stories and their strong strength and strong characters. They had diversity in their characters, conflict with each other sometimes, but you'd be surprised how the beach was broken down and divided up, and there's North Beach and South Beach, and there were lieutenants that worked best in one area, not the other area, and it was good. Cap was a good leader. He was able to hold it together, keep everybody working.
Sure.
And
I've heard stories about how he, in his early days as a lifeguard, he would ride a horse up and down the coast. And Harold, do you know that story?
I've heard the story, but that was before my time.
Sure, sure. Well, he was before many people's time. He
Right.
was a lifeguard from the very early days of the existence of lifeguards.
I think at one time they even had at the Ocean Park Pier where a guy rode a horse off the end, jumped the horse off the end of the pier.
Off the end of the pier.
Right. That was. Then one day, I think the horse suffered some malady. They decided it was not purposeful to put the horse through that stunt again. But Cap Watkins, I knew him only in the same line as Tom. He was the leader. I had lieutenants that were supervisorial to me, and though I know that he had a really nice home up above Trancas there, and that one of his friends would come and visit with him. I think his name was Earl Warren.
Sure.
Was a close friend of Cap Watkins, and so they kept that relationship going for, as far as I know, several years.
Very good. A name that I know both of you are going to probably want to speak a lot about, and that's that Pete Peterson. Harold, would you like to start with this time and tell us a little bit about?
Well, Tom worked with Pete
Sure.
more than I did, but I just know that Pete, without a doubt, has to be considered the best all-round waterman that this coast has ever seen. Not only was he skilled aquatically, both as a diver and as a swimmer and as a paddleboard and a surfer, but he was also an ultimate craftsman. I noticed you brought this piece of gear right here.
I did.
Well, this was one of the singular rescue devices that Pete developed. He made one before this that was air-filled, but because of the possibility of it deflating and so on, he came up with this, and he modified this one as well. So with this, it made rescues significantly easier.
Sure.
Because you could swim out to the victim, and you wouldn't have to struggle with them. You just give them that, snap them into it, and when you're coming through the surf, this would float them. You could wrap your legs around the bottom of their legs, put their head against your shoulder, and go over the falls, and they'd still be in the tube.
Yeah, and you see these everywhere. This is
Yes.
all around the world they use
And
this.
the other one
this
that they're
Peterson
using now
tube.
is the hard plastic one.
Mhm.
But for me, in the surf, I would rely on this.
The Pete Peterson tube.
The Peterson tube, and he made competition paddleboards for the Lifeguards. Yeah, his skills, he was unique in so many different ways. His skills as a stuntman in the studios, when they needed technical advice, Pete got the word. And he was, you know, some of the characters that Gary Cooper played in the movies,
Yeah?
yeah, he was that kind of a guy. Just,
He was that kind of guy.
you know, but he had that incredible skill of being able to divine things before anybody else did. Yeah, he was a remarkable human being.
And Tom, he introduced you
Yeah,
to...
yeah. Yeah, that's so right. You know, there's all kinds of stories. I remember going over. There's
And I have a story when you're done.
Yeah, over at the Marina del Rey is built on top of what used to be a lake, a small lake, but nonetheless a lake in which all the oil wastes were shoved into. He did a lot of there was a very popular short series called Beat Smith Short or Smith Short Series, where they would and my first ride in a helicopter was in the late 40s, where we were over there taking pictures of him skiing on his feet and all these different things, in which he was kind of a leader in all those things. He was the first to do it, but he was very unassuming. You could never talk about what he's done necessarily or anything. He never talked about the feats that he performed, and yet he was continuously doing things extraordinarily different than it had been done before. And like I said, I worked for him. He was on the side a contractor, and he built some stuff, so I worked with him on that. And always we were at times in competition. You could see he rowed and he paddled, and I was rowing and paddling. But he was a great waterman.
He was. Harold, you had another story?
He had a dive boat that he called a Mike. I think the Mike was about 24 feet long. And
That's
he was,
my story.
Oh, well, then you
No,
tell
no,
it.
no,
Go on.
No.
Because this is the way I heard this story. He's coming back with a load of stuff with one other guy from Santa Barbara at night, and they're cruising back. And this was basically, you did stuff with compass. There was no such thing as GPS, and there was no such thing as a sophisticated radio system. You could go to the marine operator, and you could get through what you wanted to do. But as they were coming back in the middle of the night, they ran into a submerged log and punched a hole in the front part of the boat called the bow. I know that, Tom, the bow of the boat.
Right.
And what transpired is the boat started to fill up with water, and it looked like it was going to flood out the engine. So Pete went back and he knocked out a hole in the back end of the boat. so the water just flew through the boat, and he kept going. But he immediately got on the phone, and his friend Dutch ran the hoist at the end of the Santa Monica Pier.
Dutch Horton.
He said, hey, Dutch, make sure you have the slings in the water. So sure enough, Pete drove up, they put in the slings, and picked up, and he saved the boat.
How about that?
Yeah.
Tom, is that the way it happened?
Yeah, I just happened to be lucky enough to be on the pier when the boat came in.
Oh,
And what my side of the story was, a scarf gave away, and the scarf is where plywood's laminated together, and it pulled down, tore a big piece off by the lip of that scarf dropping down.
Okay.
And you know, to think about water rushing in, and here you are out there in the middle of the ocean, you say, let's get the hell off of this thing. But nope. He thought, well, the boat moves right along real good, the motor's running good, knock out the stern, and the water will just rush right on through. And sure as hell, he pulled it off.
He brought it in safely.
He brought it in.
Wow.
And he was doing things like that all the time. But most of the stories you don't hear unless there's someone there to witness them, because he never repeated. He was not a storyteller.
Not a self-promoter.
No, he was not he didn't tell stories around coffee or anything. He was a quiet guy.
Okay, great.
Anyway.
I love Pete Peterson stories. I really do.
And he could pick the women pretty good.
He could.
And he always had a good surfing partner. He always had good tandem surfers. He was a super tandem surfer.
Oh yeah, he won the
champion.
tandem surfing contest many years into his late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah, but
Really?
but it wasn't the same girls, obviously.
No, he wanted to, I think he had to keep a lighter model.
Yeah.
We only have a couple more minutes, but I want to touch on Tommy Zahn, who also had at least one interesting girlfriend.
Yes.
And who would...
Tom, to me, we were competitors, and yet we were very good friends about talking about paddling and all. And so I was in a lot of races with him. I would say he probably was a better paddler than I was, but we exchanged championships. One very fun one was when the Outlook elected to give me enough money to send me to Hawaii for a Christmas Diamond Head buoy race. Well, there was a Tom Moore, a Tom Zahn, and a Tom Volk, all three in the races, and we brought home the perpetual trophy to Santa Monica.
The Toms.
With the three Toms, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I just remember Tom in his surfing days at Malibu. He was a blonde-haired goddess. I think he tried to make it in the movies. He played great ukulele. He was an incredible connoisseur of classical music. I mean, he was a well-balanced human being, but his skills on the paddleboard were quite phenomenal. He was probably the lead for many years, and that was before they got into fiber carbon boards and all the sophisticated boards that they're using today. And so yeah, I had held Tom in great regard. He was a boat skipper for Santa Monica and for the county for many years before he retired. And as I mentioned earlier in the conversation, he was responsible for Lifeguards to go beyond the age of 62.
That's right. You did mention that.
Yep, that
Now,
was a singular contribution.
Now, true or false, just before I wrap up, I've always heard a rumor that he at one time was dating Marilyn Monroe. True?
They, from what I understand, they both were studying to become thespians, and they studied together.
Okay.
There is
And
substance.
the studio did put them together to go on dates and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's-
I'm going to accept
there's
that
some
he
substance
dated
to
Marilyn
that story.
Monroe.
And also with the famous movie producer, too. He ran with his daughter for a long
Darylyn
time.
Zanuck?
Darylyn
I'd heard
Zanuck,
that
yeah.
one too.
Yep.
Such an interesting life you guys have led. And I think we've all gained a great respect and appreciation for our local heroes. And I want to thank you for joining me, Tom and Harold.
Thank you for having us.
And please join me next time for some more Santa Monica Pier stories.